All right, welcome back to the Phoenix Founders Podcast. We're here today with Scarlett Spring, co-founder and CEO of Taproot. Welcome, Scarlett.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Scarlett.
Hi.
How's everything going in your world?
It's going well. I mean, just super busy, but that's a good thing.
I thought that you, like all founders, are just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, just
Sitting around
eating
doing nothing.
bonbons.
Yeah.
No, it's been an interesting summer. I mean, for those of you who kind of follow and track us, we did a really small round. It was our seed round, and we closed it. We did a little bit of a double close. We did that in December of 22, and then we kind of wrapped it up in March. But it was just enough for us to answer a couple of questions, so we knew we would need to raise money, and then the markets just kind of went crazy.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. We're going to get into all that.
Yeah.
We'd like to start with the origin story
of
Taproot here, and then we're going to talk about some of the funding journey, some of the lessons learned, and what we always hope in this podcast is some nuggets or lessons learned that we can share with other founders, people who want to go big and build meaningful software companies here in Arizona. So we are going to jump into it. Allie, should we talk about the origin of Taproot?
Talk about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Taproot?
Well, I think all of us in some way get touched by Alzheimer's or dementia. And I've been touched in my family by that. And just so happens that my spouse is been in the dementia space for, about 25 years. So has been like worked, whether it's for a health plan, for a provider group, or been a consultant in the senior living space. And so it's been really interesting to not only see like my personal family history kind of collide with watching my spouse's professional lives come together. And it was probably around 2016, 2017 that she said to me, I feel like there's a pattern to what I'm doing. And I, kind of brushed it off because I was doing something else. I was running another early stage company in the healthcare space looking at early cancer diagnosis. But as kind of 2018, a couple of years later, came around, we kept talking about it, and I kept hearing her go through almost what you would think a differential diagnosis is, like a physician. How are you getting hit? Where are you getting hit? Is it the right hand? Is it the left hand? Is it when you're changing? Is it changing tops? Is it changing bottoms? And I would just be listening to all of this, and then all of a sudden, she would come up with such a unique way for a caregiver to approach them and to de-escalate them. So I kind of got super curious because all this was going on like in the midst of, on the kitchen table. And so we hired Chris Yu, which some of you guys know. He's here in the Chris Yu and his team at Systems Imagination, and we built our first crude database with about $17,000. Because I said, look, if we lose $17,000, I think we can live with that. And that database actually was kind of our first proof of concept.
I love that. I also love that your spouse was the kind of subject matter expert. You had like executive healthcare experience. I mean, we see that pattern a lot, like someone who's got deep domain expertise, and then there's a co-founder to kind of complement that experience. I'd love to talk about the dynamics of working with your spouse too, by the way. I'm so interested in that.
I don't know that you guys have enough time for that one. But yes, we have found our lane.
Yeah. But what happened after you did that, by the way? After you got the first database set up, you got the first kind of MVP going, if you will. What happened after that?
Yeah, so the first one actually kind of proved that the machine learning could actually do the prediction. And so we kind of got some positive feedback that, yeah, with enough data, we believe that the machine learning would work. Fast forward 6 months later, we then saw that we could actually reduce sedative medications. And that first cut of the data, because we only had about 100 residents that we were studying, so super small. It was not statistical significant, but we showed an 11% reduction in that small window of time of sedative psychotropic medications. And I think intuitively everyone knows that in senior living there's too many psychotropics that are used, so you're basically giving a sedative medicine to someone who's already prone to fall, and thus they fall more. So that was even a second marker. And it was from there that I worked the network and went down to UTI, which is off there in Tempe, and we got some students to build our first MVP so that we could actually interview caregivers and figure out what that app needed to look like so that it would not impede their work. So when you talk about kind of trying to do this as on a skinny budget, putting as many milestones in place so that you could prove out, understand, and learn on as cheap of a budget as possible, but still get some quality feedback is kind of where we were trying to find that sweet spot.
And it sounds like you were very resourceful, thinking, I can tap into a local college, leverage the students there. I wonder if a lot of founders are wondering, how can I accomplish this on a shoestring budget? And you've done that.
It was true.
To get your MVP in a market.
That's right. And this gets back to networking because Russ Yelton, who's a dear friend and also in this kind of early space, he made that connection so that we could use the students to build that first MVP, which, we pretty quickly pivoted away from it, but we ended up getting 2 different quality surveys from those and some interviews that really helped us then to do kind of that first app.
Yeah, allowed you to get some real market feedback. Yeah, I love it.
And you said that Taproot is B2B to C.
Well, we started pure B2B. We went into senior living. That is a very difficult market to introduce a new product into because you do have heavy turnover of caregivers. It is not unusual for that caregiver market to be somewhere 68 to 75% turnover in a normal year, and then you had COVID, and we were actually launching Taproot Ella. Ella is what the name of our app because it elevates the caregiving, and we launched during the COVID. So I was doing some of those surveys all via Zoom because they were fighting their own issues, and that is just trying to care for residents and to try to minimize outbreaks because we know that senior living also was negatively impacted through the COVID outbreaks. But yes, that's where we began. And from that, we are now today moving upstream, and we are B2B to C in the home care model. So now we're trying to wrap into that family caregiver because there's over 14 million family caregivers out there today that are at home trying to care for a loved one who has some sort of cognitive disorder, whether that end up being Alzheimer's, dementia, or just mental illness. And Ella can actually provide support for those individuals to be able to help manage and keep individuals at home longer.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, I know a little bit of this, but I'd love for our audience to hear about what Ella actually does. So how does Ella engage with the caregivers? And just on a personal note, my father-in-law passed away in January with Alzheimer's. My mother, who lives across the street from me, has, dementia now. And so this is also personal for me and probably most of us that have, at a minimum, aging parents here. So I'd love to hear more about what Ella does and how it solves problem for caregivers.
It does. And, I do hear this story, Greg, and my mom is having memory issues right now, so I'm living it as we're also, kind of breathing life into this company. So what Ella does is, number one, we feel very strongly that if you have a personalized approach to that loved one, that you've just increased the likelihood of being able to have that individual be calm. So whether you're de-escalating a behavior or whether you are preventing a behavior, your success rate goes up if you can actually relate to them personally. If you can only imagine a caregiver that's got 75% space of turning over, which happens in senior living, you're constantly seeing sticky notes all over a room because family members are trying to educate that caregiver. This was a person who had this life. They were an educator. So the first thing that we do is we upload the personal information. It would be considered like an intake form. And so we load lots of information. Now, we ask a little bit more than what you might consider because we want to know things like, did they have an injury of falling off a bike? Did they have a horseback? Because so many of the aches and pains as we age come into play when you're trying to have caregiving that are forgotten about, and sometimes it's those painful earlier injuries, which will never show up in an electronic medical record, are sometimes causing some of the adverse behaviors that we try to avoid. But after the personal information is loaded up, we now then will enable that caregiver, whether that's a family caregiver or whether that's a professional, paraprofessional, we enable them to go into Ella. You see the personal information so that whether you know that individual or not, you already know something to talk to them about. If they were an educator and they came from Iowa, well, you can talk to them about, Iowa basketball or the football team or things that are relevant to them. And it will give you personalized approaches to be able to de-escalate and prevent those behaviors. And what we've been able to see is that Ella is effective over 87% of the time in being able to calm down those individuals.
I love that. And that's incredible efficacy, 87%. I love that.
Wow, I'm taking this in. It's so amazing. What an amazing technology. And did you know from the beginning that you wanted to include machine learning and natural language processing? Yeah.
Thanks, Allie. Absolutely. Because my spouse is a psychologist that's kind of been dedicated in the space, number one, they're expensive. So not many senior living communities can afford to have someone that comes in and coaches them in these approaches of how you would, manage these individuals. And then number two, there's not enough of them to go around even if you could pay for them. So we knew from the very beginning this was a way to scale dementia expertise that needs to be incorporated when you're caring for individuals who have these cognitive deficits.
And are you thinking through to other applications for this dementia expertise beyond this level of care?
Absolutely. This same platform, and we do consider it a platform technology, and I apologize because I know that terms get overused, but Ella we will move next into autism because we consider Ella to be useful when individuals have problems communicating their needs. So whether that is mental health, whether that is autism, or whether that is Alzheimer's and dementia. We brand ourselves as Alzheimer's dementia, but about a third of the residents that are on our platform actually have severely mentally ill disease. So today we're actually being used in mental health. But our next area that we want to move to is in autism. And I would say once a quarter, at least twice a year, someone comes and says, when are you going to go into autism?
I can see that.
Parents themselves are equally, they can't find caregivers because to understand someone's triggers is so important. And Ella captures those triggers. That's what that personal information is giving Ella, is all of that background information so that you know what to avoid and what to engage.
I love that.
It's personalized care at scale.
That's right. I love that. And now we've got the marketing expertise in the room right there. But yes.
I wanted to ask about, just looking back over the last few years, tough time to start a company in COVID. There's got to be so many learnings related to that, but just the evolution in general. Like when you look back and think about some of the things you've learned over the last few years that are, like what are, and this isn't even specific to Ella or your customer base, it just in general, company building, what are some things you've learned? I know you're an expert, you've done this multiple times, but are there anything you've learned in this kind of founder journey here that is unique to Taproot here, or something you learned a lot in the last few years?
Well, I would never say an expert, number one. I think, secondly, bruises and black eyes go a long way, so I have those. But number one, you can't overstate getting your ego out of the way because, look, I grew up in the healthcare, but the pharmaceutical business. And so I was 20 years starting out carrying the bag, and I retired being kind of running the oncology portfolio for AstraZeneca. So I was a national sales director with a large team and a big budget. Coming into what is really much more of a digital healthcare space that has a bit of a SaaS component, but a little bit of this digital health, so the pair is a bit of a hybrid. I totally went back to the ground. I went and put myself back through virtual accelerators. I did the ACA virtual. I went back through the ACA Innovation Challenge. I was fortunate enough to be able to get into the startup group and just tried to soak in what are the terms, what are people saying? Because just because you've been in another space and had some success, you garner the leadership parts, but you don't garner like the business application parts. And I just, tried to be very humble about what I did know, but what I didn't know. And I didn't know a lot, and I just, sucked it up and did that. So I think number one, it's always trying to make sure that you're learning those nuggets. And I think, secondly, particularly in the early stages when you are so skinny on a budget, is how do you get that part-time talent? How do you get that 1099 talent that is going to help you and be quality enough that can get you to a point to where you can raise enough money to then begin to hire your full-time people. And those are scary days. And that's where being able to sell your vision, and maybe that's where some of my gray hair did come into play, because I could sell the vision. And we were super fortunate to be able to get very talented people. Even though it began on a part-time basis, they've grown with us and scaled with us.
Yeah, so always be learning, and with lesson number one. Lesson number two, I think you were two parts to it that I loved. You said it's not just it's attracting resources, but also being able to make those costs variable so you can kind of manage that on a budget, which I think is tough to do. But and you've done a great job of that. Should we talk about the funding journey?
Yeah, because you've got an interesting funding journey.
Well, I think so. I mean, we bootstrapped it, and I think I've shared a couple of the nuggets of how that we did that early on. And we did our first seed round, so that we ended up closing like a 1.4 round, but that was only about $750,000 of new money, because we had done a convertible note of about $700,000 leading up to that over the prior, call it year and a half. As we all know, that money doesn't go too terribly far, so you've got to be very, very purposeful with it. And one of the things that I made sure that I did was try to stretch that as far as possible, because getting new clients on board is the lifeblood. So being able to see that nice growth in revenues, stretch that out, and simultaneously, and Greg, you've kind of chanted this to all of us that, continue to use you as a mentor, and that is, be looking at those milestones that you can hit, but also be increasing that valuation and being mindful. You can't run out of money. You've got to keep making that progress, and how do you balance those two? And, at times my team were like, look, we need a branding strategy, and our logo is like, a bit sophomore-ish. And I acknowledge all those things. Our website does need a refresh, and we do need a new logo that's a bit more family-friendly. But that does not prohibit us from selling, and that was something I pushed the team on. We did make an investment, and that was hiring someone to do biz dev and to fill our funnel, and we did that in April with the funding that we did, the seed round that we did, and we've been able to fill that funnel for the past 2 quarters, and I just was able to close a 1.8 round. Now this is going to be a safe note, and we got really favorable terms on it.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. A little bit of catch that happened at the 11th hour, and that was I didn't get as much upfront money as I thought that I was going to get. So I do have to figure out a way to get to January, between now and January. But the money will start coming in installments. So it'll be a little bit of challenge that I don't have as much control over it, but it does give a solid runway. and so that we can plan, because that's the hard part, is how do you make sure that you're planning so that you're marrying up the milestones that you can attain.
There's so much uncertainty. I think that founders experience, and I'm sure what you're sharing resonates with a lot of people. You've got to figure out what to invest in. Like what are investments that I have to make now? What are some investments that I might be able to defer a little bit because I cannot run out of cash, and I've just got to, like, that's job number one sometimes. Like, don't run out of cash, and then try to show growth and proof points that attract future investors if you're on that kind of an investment path. So I think those are great lessons learned. What investments can you make now? What investments can you defer, and how can you constantly be selling to show progress in your business? So thank you for sharing those.
I would say a third thing.
Oh, good. Let's do it.
I would say a third thing is surrounding yourself with good advisors. And I was very fortunate to get in my seed round to get a lead investor who is big. He likes the space. He's been so supportive of female founders, although he has lots of male founders as well. But he really has leaned in, and he says that he's totally blind. It just so happens like his last 4 investments have been with female founders. So I'm super happy. And it's Ray Krogan, which I know
love
you
Ray.
guys. Isn't he great? So
We're
Ray,
co-investors with Ray. He's an
Yeah.
investor in our fund. Ray is spectacular.
Spectacular. So Ray is just, anytime you call, he's there. And then Tom Curzon is someone that is just a constant, text away, that just to bounce things off, and not just legal, because as we all know, that's kind of that's where
Tom's all right.
his expertise.
He's all right.
He's all right.
He's all right. He's all right.
Yeah. So
The OG. He's the OG.
he is. So having those individuals to, and then good strategics, being able to, we were very fortunate that in this last round, we ended up with a high net worth investor in our pocket that is the person who came forward to lead this round. So it wasn't a new investor, it was a current investor, and who cares so deeply about the dementia space. And we're just thrilled to have him.
Your business seems particularly suited for a strategic investor or people who feel real affinity for this, because you have the ability to be. I mean, everybody can be purpose driven, but there is like next level purpose with what you're doing, and this is a problem that most of us are going to experience firsthand in some way. It's going to hit close to home for so many of us. But you've got a purpose, I think, that has like incredible ability to attract like strategic investment or other people around the table. Is that true? That would be my guess.
It is, and when you all kind of heaped an accolade that I've been in the space and expert in fundraising, I think I can't accept that accolade, but what I will accept is that I have had a knack for profiling the type of investor that will be interested in us. And it worked for me in my prior company that was around lung cancer, early prevention and screening, to find that vein in those individuals that felt so strongly about that. And I have been very successful in profiling and finding that investor that cares very deeply about the Alzheimer's, dementia, mental illness space.
That is something that I think is so important and escapes a lot of founders. Is a lot of times people think I need to talk to 5 or 6 people and I'll raise capital. But do you ever think about fundraising like a funnel at all? I mean, you're talking about a process of qualifying. Like, I'm going after my kind of specific targets, and then you kind of got to qualify them and pursue them. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, you think about product market fit. Well, I'm not an expert in product market fit. We all have to do lots of interviews and help people bring to the table so that you can actually do that, because there are experts in product market fit. But what I feel that I have the kind of a talent for is on this the fundraising side and on the investor side of trying to find that niche, and I've had some success there.
I love it.
How did you build that skill?
Look, I'm a believer in there are skills and there are talents. And for those of us who read the book First Break All the Rules, which was kind of one of the first leadership development and coaching books, and then he followed it up with several others, but that one was actually differentiating the difference between a skill and a talent. And it just so happens that I happen to have a skill for that one, so it's a bit innate. I'll call it God-given, if you will. It is something that happens to be a bit of right-handedness for me that's a little easier. But I have honed it with skill sets of learning a bit about how to better profile and how to find those individuals.
What would you say to people like me who have no skills and no talent? Like, I've got a problem with neither. So what would you say to people if you've got neither?
Yeah, I think
it's a problem.
Yeah, I think first you do have to make sure that your product, you're finding, and you called it higher purpose. I think that's a fair point. I think it is, regardless of what it is, there's a pain point, and how are you finding the individuals that have that pain point? And mine happened to be steeped in healthcare and or these issues that I had some personal experience with. But if you don't, there's a reason that a founder has chosen to put themselves through the highs and lows of starting their own company. And that passion is in that purpose. And your job is to find other people that when you're speaking to them about it, that it's lighting up in their eyes as well.
They care about what you care about.
They care about what you care about. And as you're speaking with them, they're telling you their story. And what I say is be quiet and listen to that story, because it's in them telling you that story of where you're going to find the nuggets, not only for that individual, but when you go mine for the next individual.
Yeah, I love that.
Wow. The Phoenix Founders Podcast is sponsored by Arizona Venture Development Corp.,